My beloved child. Before you wonder why your heart has felt unusually restless, listen closely to this story. Somewhere beyond the noise of ordinary days, someone you have never stopped affecting has just broken into tears, not from sorrow, but from a joy they never believed they would live long enough to feel. They are whispering your name through trembling breaths, trying to understand how hope, once buried so deeply, suddenly found its way back to the surface. They don't yet know that this moment is only the beginning, and neither do you. For so long, your paths seemed written in disappearing footprints. Every sunrise brought another reason to believe the distance between two hearts had become permanent. Seasons passed. Familiar places changed. Conversations faded into memories that felt too fragile to touch. Yet somewhere, hidden beneath the ordinary rhythm of life, another story refused to end. It waited quietly, like a melody carried by the wind before anyone recognized the song. Imagine someone standing beside a rain-speckled window just before dawn. The world outside is still wrapped in soft gray light. Their coffee has gone cold. Their thoughts have wandered back to the same person they promised themselves they would stop thinking about. They smile sadly at old memories, tiny moments that no one else would consider important. A shared laugh. A look across a crowded room. A goodbye that never felt complete. I wonder if they're happy, they whisper. No one answers. Yet something inside them suddenly shifts. Without warning, an unexplainable peace settles over their heart. It isn't loud. It doesn't arrive like thunder. It feels more like sunlight slowly reaching the corner of a room that has been dark for years. Their breathing changes. Their shoulders relax. The heaviness they've carried begins to dissolve. Then the tears come. Not because they have all the answers. Not because every obstacle has disappeared. But because, for the very first time, they feel certain that what seemed impossible may not have been lost after all. At first, they try to dismiss the feeling. They tell themselves it's only wishful thinking. Hope can be dangerous after disappointment. They have learned that lesson before. Yet every attempt to ignore this strange certainty only makes it stronger. It follows them throughout the day. In the quiet moments between conversations. In the music playing through the car speakers. Even in the unexpected smile of a stranger walking by. It's as though life itself keeps gently repeating the same message. Don't give up yet. Still, they cannot understand why today feels different from every day before it. Meanwhile, your own journey has been changing in ways you haven't fully noticed. Small choices you almost overlooked have quietly transformed you. The version of yourself that carried old fears is beginning to step aside for someone stronger, kinder, and more willing to believe that healing is possible. You may not see the transformation because you've lived through every difficult step, but those who once knew only your struggles would hardly recognize the quiet strength you've been building. The remarkable thing is that this unseen growth has created ripples far beyond your own life. Without either of you realizing it, two separate stories have been moving toward the same turning point. One heart has been learning how to wait without losing faith. The other has been learning how to heal without losing love. Neither journey has been wasted. As evening arrives, your soulmate finds themselves opening a forgotten box tucked away in the back of a closet. Inside are simple reminders of another chapter of life: a faded photograph, an old handwritten note, a small keepsake that most people would throw away without thinking twice. They hold it carefully. A smile appears through fresh tears. "This isn't over," they whisper, almost laughing at themselves for saying it aloud. For the first time in years, those words don't sound impossible. They sound true. Yet something even stranger happens next. Their phone lights up. It isn't a message from you. It isn't even from someone who knows your story. Instead, it is an unexpected conversation that leads them to hear something completely ordinary: words that should mean nothing at all. But somehow those words unlock a memory they had forgotten, one tiny detail from long ago that suddenly changes how they understand everything that happened between you. The puzzle they've been trying to solve for so long begins to rearrange itself. Pieces they believed were broken now seem as though they were only waiting for the right moment to fit together. That realization overwhelms them. The tears return, but now they flow freely, carrying away years of regret. If only you could see them now. If only you knew what realization has just filled their heart. Because the joy they feel isn't simply about remembering you. It's about discovering something astonishing about who you have become. And that discovery is preparing them to make a decision they never imagined they would have the courage to make. But before that decision can change both of your lives, one final hidden truth must come into the light, a truth neither of you has fully understood, one that explains why every delay, every silence, and every unexpected detour happened exactly when it did. When that truth is revealed, nothing between these two hearts will ever feel the same again. The next morning arrived without fanfare, yet everything seemed to carry a quiet sense of expectation. The air felt lighter, the sunlight lingered a little longer on familiar streets, and somewhere deep inside your soulmate, an invisible thread kept pulling them toward a decision they could no longer postpone. They tried to distract themselves with ordinary routines, but ordinary moments had begun revealing extraordinary meaning. It was as though life itself had started speaking in whispers instead of words, inviting them to notice what they had overlooked for far too long. They found themselves returning to a place they had not visited in years, a peaceful overlook where the horizon stretched endlessly beyond rolling hills. It had once been the place where impossible dreams felt believable. Standing there again, they closed their eyes as a gentle breeze carried the scent of pine and summer earth. Suddenly, memories arrived with remarkable clarity, not as painful reminders, but as living moments filled with forgotten details. They remembered your laughter echoing louder than they had realized, your quiet acts of kindness that had gone unnoticed at the time, and the way your presence had always made ordinary days feel unexpectedly meaningful. Then an unexpected realization settled over them. They had spent so much time mourning what they thought was lost that they had never stopped to ask a different question. What if the story had never been ending at all? What if every season of waiting had quietly been preparing both of you for a reunion that neither heart was ready to receive before now? That thought refused to leave. Later that afternoon, a conversation unfolded with someone whose wisdom had always carried unusual weight. It wasn't planned. It happened naturally, almost by accident. As they spoke about life, growth, and the surprising ways people change, one sentence landed with unmistakable force. Sometimes the greatest miracle isn't finding the right person, the voice said softly. It's becoming the person who can finally recognize what has always mattered. Silence followed. Your soulmate couldn't respond immediately. Those words unlocked something hidden beneath years of unanswered questions. They finally understood that they had been searching for certainty while life had been patiently teaching them courage. The difference changed everything. Meanwhile, your own path had been moving through equally profound transformations. Without realizing it, you had begun letting go of expectations that once controlled your heart. The victories were quiet. They weren't announced with celebration. They appeared in simple choices to forgive when bitterness felt easier, to hope after disappointment, to keep walking forward even when the destination remained unseen. Those quiet victories had reshaped your spirit. Though you couldn't see it, the person your soulmate remembered was no longer the person you had become. The change wasn't about perfection. It was about authenticity. Every difficult chapter had softened sharp edges without diminishing your strength. The light you carried now came from experience instead of innocence. And somehow, they could feel that. That evening, your soulmate opened an old journal they hadn't touched in years. Between its worn pages rested unfinished letters, abandoned dreams, and promises they had written only to themselves. Most entries reflected uncertainty, but one page near the end stopped them completely. It contained a single sentence written long ago. If our paths are ever meant to cross again, I hope I recognize the gift instead of my fear. Their hands trembled. How could words written years earlier describe exactly what they were feeling today? Tears gathered again, but these were different. They were no longer mourning missed opportunities. They were honoring the remarkable journey that had transformed uncertainty into quiet confidence. For the first time, they no longer wished they could rewrite the past. They simply wished to be ready for whatever came next. As night settled across the sky, countless stars appeared one by one, each shining gently against the darkness. Your soulmate stepped outside and looked upward, breathing deeply. They whispered a promise carried only by the evening breeze. If another chance exists, I won't let fear speak louder than love again. The words felt both fragile and powerful. And in another place, without knowing why, your own heart paused. Perhaps it was during a quiet walk. Perhaps while watching the sky fade into twilight. Perhaps while sitting alone in peaceful reflection. Whatever the moment, something stirred within you, a calm certainty that the next chapter of your story was drawing closer with every passing hour. Neither of you knew the exact day. Neither of you knew the exact place. But both of your hearts had unknowingly crossed the final threshold that had kept your lives moving in separate directions. Still, one final obstacle remained. It wasn't distance. It wasn't time. It wasn't another person. It was a hidden truth about the past that had never been spoken aloud by either of you, a truth that, once revealed, would explain every misunderstanding, every silence, and every choice that seemed impossible to understand. Your soulmate is closer than ever to discovering it. And when those final pieces fall into place, the message they have been longing to share with you will change both of your futures forever. But before they can speak those long-awaited words, one unexpected encounter is about to reveal the secret neither of you ever imagined was waiting all along. The encounter arrived disguised as an ordinary interruption. Your soulmate had planned nothing more than a quiet afternoon, yet a single unexpected invitation changed the course of the day. It came from someone connected to an earlier chapter of life, a person they had not spoken with in years. There was no dramatic announcement, no urgent request, only a simple suggestion to meet and catch up. They almost declined. Something inside urged them not to. The conversation began with familiar smiles and harmless memories. They laughed about places that no longer existed and dreams that had taken surprising turns. But as the hours unfolded, the discussion drifted toward moments that had never been fully understood. Then came a sentence neither of them expected. "You know," the old friend said thoughtfully, "I always wondered why you believed they walked away so easily. That was never the story I saw." The room became impossibly still. Your soulmate felt as though every sound beyond the table had disappeared. Their heartbeat grew louder than the voices around them. "What do you mean?" they asked quietly. The answer arrived without judgment. There were things happening behind the scenes that you couldn't have known. They weren't choosing distance because they stopped caring. They were carrying burdens they never wanted you to carry with them. Those words settled into the silence like gentle rain after a long drought. Suddenly, years of unanswered questions began finding their missing pieces. Memories that once appeared cold now revealed hidden tenderness. Moments once mistaken for rejection now looked remarkably different when viewed through compassion instead of confusion. The truth was never that love had failed. The truth was that both hearts had been protecting each other in ways neither one understood. Far away, your own life was unfolding with equal quiet significance. You found yourself noticing how much lighter your spirit had become. Challenges that once would have shaken your confidence no longer defined your days. Instead of asking why difficult seasons had happened, you had begun asking what they had prepared you to become. Without realizing it, your perspective had transformed your future. You were no longer waiting for happiness to arrive before choosing peace. You had learned to carry peace first. And that invisible change was about to reach someone who needed to witness it more than anyone else. That evening, your soulmate wandered through familiar streets as twilight painted the sky in soft shades of gold and violet. Children laughed in nearby parks. Lights slowly appeared inside neighborhood windows. Life continued as it always had, yet everything felt remarkably new. They noticed couples walking together. Families sharing quiet conversations. Strangers holding doors open for one another. Simple acts of kindness suddenly seemed extraordinary. For the first time, they realized the future they had imagined wasn't built from grand miracles alone. It would be built from ordinary moments shared with the right heart. That realization brought unexpected joy instead of longing. The tears returned once more, but these carried gratitude. Not gratitude because every question had already been answered. Gratitude because they finally understood that healing had quietly been happening all along. As they continued walking, something unexpected caught their attention. A small bookstore stood open later than usual. Drawn by quiet curiosity, they stepped inside. Shelves filled with worn pages surrounded them, carrying countless stories of beginnings, endings, and everything between. One book slipped slightly from its place, almost as if inviting discovery. When they opened it, a folded note rested between the pages. It wasn't addressed to anyone. It simply read: "Some people arrive exactly when you need them. Others return only after you've both become who you were meant to be." Your soulmate closed their eyes. The words felt strangely personal. Not because they believed the note had been left for them, but because it expressed what their own heart had finally found the courage to believe. Leaving the shop, they made a quiet decision. No more guessing. No more allowing fear to write stories that truth had never spoken. If another opportunity appeared, they would meet it with honesty instead of hesitation. Yet even as that promise settled firmly within them, another revelation was already moving closer. Someone else had been quietly watching both journeys from a distance. Not to interfere. Not to separate. But because they had carried one final piece of the story that neither of you possessed. That person had remained silent for years, believing the moment was never right. Now, after witnessing how both of your lives had changed, they knew they could remain silent no longer. Within days, a conversation will begin that neither of you expects. It will uncover the last hidden chapter behind every misunderstanding. And when those forgotten words are finally spoken aloud, your soulmate will realize why tears of joy filled their eyes before they even understood the reason. The answer has been closer than either of you imagined. But the one who carries it is already taking the first step toward changing everything. Morning arrived wrapped in quiet anticipation, though neither of you could have explained why the world seemed subtly transformed. The familiar rhythm of daily life continued as always, yet beneath every ordinary moment ran the unmistakable feeling that something long delayed had finally begun moving. It was like standing beside the ocean before sunrise, sensing the tide change before seeing the first wave reach the shore. Your soulmate received an unexpected phone call just before noon. The voice on the other end hesitated for a moment, as though choosing words with extraordinary care. "There's something I should have told you years ago." No accusation followed. No dramatic confession. Only a calm sincerity that carried the weight of untold history. The conversation unfolded slowly, revealing details that had remained hidden not because of betrayal, but because everyone involved believed silence was the kinder choice. Decisions had been made out of protection rather than indifference. Messages had gone undelivered. Assumptions had quietly replaced conversations. What appeared from a distance to be the end of a beautiful connection had actually been a chain of misunderstandings, each one built upon another until the truth became almost impossible to recognize. Your soulmate listened without interruption. With every sentence, old memories shifted into new shapes. Moments that once felt like closed doors now looked like doors that had never truly been locked. They had simply been standing on opposite sides, each believing the other had already walked away. When the call finally ended, they remained seated in complete silence. Not because they were overwhelmed by regret. Because they were overwhelmed by relief. The story they had carried in their heart for so many years was no longer the only version of the past. There was another story. A truer one. At nearly the same time, your own day led you toward an unexpected pause. Perhaps it came while sorting through old belongings, perhaps while passing a place that quietly stirred forgotten memories. Whatever the setting, your attention settled on something small: a photograph, a handwritten note, or a familiar object that had survived every season of change. Instead of sadness, it brought gratitude. You realized that the person you had become could finally look backward without becoming trapped there. The past no longer demanded an explanation before allowing you to move forward. It had become a teacher instead of a prison. That quiet realization radiated through your spirit with surprising strength. Elsewhere, your soulmate stepped outside as gentle rain began to fall. Rather than searching for shelter, they welcomed the cool drops against their face. Each step felt lighter than the one before it. The rain seemed less like a storm and more like a gentle cleansing, washing away years of unanswered questions that had silently shaped every decision. For the first time in a very long while, they stopped rehearsing conversations that had never happened. Instead, they imagined conversations that finally could. They pictured speaking honestly, listening completely, allowing vulnerability to replace certainty. The future no longer felt frightening. It felt possible. As evening approached, another unexpected event unfolded. A mutual acquaintance, someone who had unknowingly witnessed pieces of both your journeys over the years, shared a simple observation. "I've never seen either of you look this peaceful before." The words were spoken casually, almost without thought. Yet they carried extraordinary significance. Peace had arrived independently in both lives before either of you had reached one another again. That changed everything. Because lasting connections are rarely built by two people desperately trying to complete each other. They are strengthened when two whole hearts choose to walk toward one another with honesty instead of fear. Without realizing it, both of you had arrived at exactly that place. Still, one question remained unanswered. If every misunderstanding had finally been uncovered, if every old fear had begun to loosen its grip, then why had your soulmate begun crying tears of joy before any reunion had taken place? Late that night, as they prepared to end the day, an envelope resting unnoticed among ordinary mail finally caught their attention. There was no return address. Inside was a single folded page. Across the top, written in familiar handwriting they recognized instantly, were words that caused their breath to stop. Not because they expected to see them, but because those words answered the very question they had carried for years. They had not been forgotten. They had been remembered far more deeply than they ever imagined. As your soulmate slowly unfolded the rest of the letter, their hands trembled not with fear, but with the overwhelming certainty that the next few moments would reveal the final reason their heart had been overflowing with joy long before they understood why. And hidden within those pages was one sentence so unexpected, so beautifully timed, that it would forever change the meaning of every chapter that came before. That sentence has not yet been read. But when it is, neither of your lives will ever follow the path you once believed was waiting. The letter remained unopened for several long moments. Your soulmate held it gently, almost afraid that unfolding the page too quickly might somehow break the fragile beauty of the moment. Outside, the night had settled into complete stillness. A single lamp cast a warm circle of light across the room, leaving the corners wrapped in soft shadow. It felt as though time itself had slowed, patiently waiting for a truth that had taken years to arrive. Finally, they unfolded the paper. The handwriting carried the unmistakable warmth of someone who had written every word with care. It did not begin with an apology. It began with gratitude. "Thank you, the letter read, "For being part of a chapter that taught me how deeply one heart can change another, even when life leads us through unexpected seasons." Your soulmate stopped reading. Those simple words reached places that years of unanswered questions never could. They realized that what had connected your lives had never disappeared. It had quietly continued shaping both of you, even while you traveled separate roads. The bond had not been measured by constant presence but by lasting influence. As they continued, the letter revealed memories so specific that only someone who had truly seen your heart could have remembered them. There was the rainy afternoon when encouragement came at exactly the right moment. The ordinary conversation that became unforgettable because of one unexpected sentence. The silent act of kindness that no audience had witnessed but that changed someone's entire week. Your soulmate smiled through glistening eyes. So many moments they had considered small had become treasured landmarks in another person's story. For the first time, they understood that love is often remembered through quiet faithfulness rather than dramatic declarations. Meanwhile, your own evening unfolded in peaceful reflection. The world outside your window shimmered beneath a sky filled with countless stars. You found yourself thinking less about what had been missing and more about everything that had quietly grown within you. Patience had replaced urgency. Compassion had softened old disappointments. Confidence no longer depended upon being understood by everyone around you. Without realizing it, you had become the very person you once hoped to meet. That invisible transformation was the answer to questions you hadn't even known you were asking. Back in the quiet room, your soulmate reached the final page of the letter. Near the bottom, one paragraph stood apart from the rest. "If life ever gives us another opportunity to meet, I hope we don't spend it explaining the years we lost. I hope we spend it discovering the years still waiting to be lived." The words settled gently into their heart. There was no bitterness. No attempt to rewrite yesterday. Only an invitation to embrace tomorrow. In that moment, something extraordinary happened. The tears that had been falling throughout this journey finally made complete sense. They were not tears celebrating the certainty of a particular outcome. They were tears celebrating freedom. Freedom from assumptions. Freedom from old fears. Freedom from believing that beautiful stories can only exist if they unfold exactly as planned. Your soulmate laughed quietly through those joyful tears, not because every mystery had been solved, but because hope no longer depended on having every answer. Hope had become a choice, and that choice filled every corner of their heart with unexpected peace. As dawn approached, they folded the letter carefully and placed it where they would never lose it again. Then they made one final promise not to chase the past, not to force tomorrow, but to welcome whatever opportunity life placed before them with openness, honesty, and courage. At that very same hour, you awakened with an unfamiliar sense of calm. There was no dramatic sign, no extraordinary event demanding your attention. Yet deep within, you felt as though a new chapter had quietly opened while you slept. The future no longer appeared hidden behind uncertainty. It stretched before you like the first light of morning spreading across an endless horizon. Neither of you knew how close your paths had become. Neither of you realized that people, places, and moments were already aligning in ways too subtle to notice. But one final surprise remained. Not another misunderstanding. Not another delay. A beginning. Someone was already preparing to arrange a meeting that neither of you expected, a simple moment that would seem completely ordinary to everyone else, yet would become unforgettable for the two hearts whose stories had been moving toward this point all along. When that moment arrives, your soulmate will finally understand why tears of joy came before the reunion ever began. And you will discover that the greatest news was never about reaching the ending you imagined. It was about standing together at the doorway of a brand new beginning. The morning of the meeting arrived without fanfare. There were no flashing signs across the sky. No voice announcing that destiny had finally caught up with two waiting hearts. The world looked beautifully ordinary. Birds welcomed the sunrise. Streets slowly filled with familiar sounds. People hurried through their routines, unaware that an unforgettable moment was quietly approaching. Your soulmate almost changed their plans. For reasons they couldn't explain, they considered staying home. The comfort of familiar surroundings briefly seemed easier than stepping into another uncertain day. Yet something gentle within urged them forward, not with pressure, but with quiet confidence. Go, their heart whispered. So they did. Elsewhere, your own day unfolded with the same quiet simplicity. You smiled at a stranger without thinking. You paused to appreciate the warmth of the morning light. You carried yourself with a peace that had been earned through every lesson, every disappointment, every unexpected turn that had shaped your journey. Neither of you realized that the greatest change had already happened long before this day arrived. It wasn't the meeting. It was the transformation. Years earlier, you might have recognized one another through longing alone. Now, you would recognize each other through peace. The people arriving at this moment were no longer searching for someone to rescue them from loneliness. They had learned how to stand with hope even in silence, how to forgive without receiving every explanation, and how to keep their hearts open without surrendering their strength. That was the true miracle of the journey. When your paths finally crossed, nothing dramatic interrupted the moment. No crowd gathered. No music played. Time did not stop. Instead, there was a quiet pause, the kind that happens when two people suddenly realize that a familiar presence has returned to their lives. Your eyes met. 1,000 unspoken memories passed between you in a single heartbeat. There was no need to rush toward the past. No need to defend old decisions. No need to measure who had suffered more or who had waited longer. The distance that once felt impossible dissolved beneath one simple truth: both of you had become people capable of meeting each other with grace instead of fear. Your soulmate smiled first. Not the uncertain smile of someone hoping for approval, but the peaceful smile of someone who finally understood why tears of joy had arrived before this day. Those tears were never celebrating certainty about the future. They were celebrating the healing that made this moment possible. With quiet honesty, they shared what had been resting on their heart. I spent so many years believing I had lost something beautiful, they said softly. Now I understand that life wasn't taking it away. It was teaching both of us how to receive it differently. You listened. Not with the urgency to correct the past, but with the wisdom to honor everything that had shaped both of your lives. The conversation that followed was filled with gentle laughter, thoughtful silence, and stories that no longer carried the weight of regret. Together, you discovered that even the hardest chapters had quietly planted seeds of compassion, resilience, and understanding. Neither of you wished to erase the journey anymore. Without it, you would never have become the people now standing together. As the sun slowly began to set, its golden light stretched across the horizon, painting the sky with colors that seemed almost too beautiful to belong to an ordinary evening. Your soulmate looked toward that glowing horizon and smiled once more. The tears that had once fallen from uncertainty had become tears of gratitude. Gratitude for every lesson. Gratitude for every season of growth. Gratitude for discovering that genuine love is not measured by how quickly two hearts find each other, but by how faithfully they continue growing, even when they cannot yet see the ending. And perhaps that is the hidden message carried through this entire story. Sometimes the greatest blessing is not that every wish comes true exactly as imagined. Sometimes it is discovering that hope has been quietly transforming you into someone ready to embrace whatever beautiful chapter comes next. May your heart always find the courage to choose kindness over bitterness, hope over despair, and peace over fear. May you recognize the quiet gifts hidden inside ordinary days, cherish the people who bring light into your life, and never underestimate the strength that grows through patience and compassion. And whenever life leads you toward a new beginning, may you step forward with confidence, knowing that every meaningful journey shapes you for something beautiful. If this fictional story touched your heart, brought you comfort, or inspired you to keep believing in new beginnings, remember to like this video, share it with someone who may need a little hope today, and subscribe for more uplifting inspirational stories. Until our next journey together, may peace, joy, and gentle hope remain with you always.